there's an introductory verse which is printed in the wherever we have Pirkei Avos. It's a verse in Yeshaya. It's based on that. Kol Yisrael yesh lo chet l'olam haba. It's a Mishnah in the last chapter in Sanhedrin. Every Jew has a share in the world to come. Shenemar. How do we know that every Jew has a share in the world to come? Because the Navi says, the prophet says, Amech kulam tzadikim. Your people are all tzadikim. That's the classification. L'olam yushu oretz. And they all inherit the land. Neitzem atoy. They're the planting of my plantings. Masu yadai lispoyer. My handiwork, through them I will be glorified. So the Navi says, the prophet says, your people are all tzaddikim. We know all Jews are not tzaddikim. But every Jew, when he's born pure. Only at the age of obligation for a woman, it's the age of 12, a male, the age of 13. Only then is he classified as a competent person. And because halakhically he has this competency, his actions, positive and negative, have ramifications, have consequences, positive and negative. But until the age of bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah, every child is pure. Even if he sins, the sin is not attributed, or it doesn't bring about any level of deficiency in that child, because the child is not of obligation yet. So every Jew, when he comes into this existence, is born in existence, he's born a tzaddik. Tzaddik is pure. So every child, when they're born, what are you born with? You're born pure with a potential. What is that potential? That potential, if you actualize it as was intended and is intended by God, because a human being has choice, and you make enough of the right choices, then you will inherit that land. It's an eternal inheritance, which is the share in the world to come, which is a relationship with God. But if you make the wrong choice, even if he's classified as Russia, as long as he has the fundamental beliefs, he still has a share in the world to come. A person, God forbid, could forfeit his share in the world to come. He's not worthy of a relationship with God. But a Jew, being born a Jew, having that special soul, the Jewish soul, as we discussed in the past, is different than a non-Jewish soul. For instance, we gave an example. A non-Jew, he's only bound by the 7 Noahide laws. A Jew has 248 positive commandments, 365 negative commandments. And these only the classification, they're subcategories of every one of the positive and every one of the negative, besides fences. So the question is, if a non-Jew, he's only bound by 7 Noahide laws, why does the Jew have, literally, relatively speaking, unlimited amount of positive and negative obligations and restrictions? Why? Does God want to torture us? Does he want to just control our lives? What is it all about? The answer is that the soul of a Jew is not like the soul of a non-Jew. It's a different realm of existence. You'll say, it's very interesting. A kosher species, a kosher animal, has 4 stomachs. Other animals only have 1 stomach. What does an animal need 4 stomachs, a kosher species? Because for an animal to be able to chew its cud and digest vegetation like grass, it has to undergo multiple levels of process to be able to be absorbed into the system of that animal. It's a different reality. Well, if an animal could eat grass, a kosher species, why can't a human being eat grass? The Gemara tells us that people in ancient days, they had cats in the houses. Why? Why did people have cats? Because cats would kill rattlesnakes, poisonous snakes. And most homes lived in regions which had poisonous snakes. A person, God, would be bitten or even not be bitten. If the snake would drink of any liquid in the home and you would afterwards ingest that liquid, you could die from the venom. Because whatever the snake partakes of, he always leaves a residue of venom in that food. If you eat it, a person could die from this or become very ill. So people had cats in the houses and they would eat the snakes. And also for rodents. That's how they kept the rodents under control. So the Gemara tells us something interesting. Any other species other than a cat, if it would eat a snake and it would bite the sac that has the venom, that animal would die. The venom would kill that species. A cat has certain enzymes in its system, in its digestive system, that when it kills the snake, those enzymes neutralize that venom, and the cat is immune to that poison, is not affected by the poison. It neutralizes that venom. But in other species, any other species, if it should eat that snake, it will die. When that sacket of venom bursts in the system of that species that eats it. This is why. The answer is because that's just the reality. Other species, they don't have that enzyme. The cat has those enzymes. Therefore, the cat is immune. A human being has to have its food prepared differently. A human being is a more fragile creature than another living species. They're able to survive and exist within environments that a human being cannot, unless we have support systems, we have protection. Our food is processed differently. We need different types of nourishment. Why? Because our system, the human system, is different than the system of an animal or an insect, just a different reality. The spiritual system of a Jew is different than the system of a non-Jew. It's a different soul. The objective of the soul of the human being, why we're here, is we're born with a potential, and we have to actualize that potential. And when we actualize it, we expand the soul to its fullest potential. And once that happens, it's worthy of relation with God because it's been spiritualized. And without that spiritualization, you cannot have a relation with God. I'll give you an example. Lahavdil, Elif Avdolis. Person is illiterate, can't barely speak the language, and he wants to go to MIT. You people are discriminatory. You discriminate. All these other people go to MIT. Why can't I go to MIT? Why not I qualify? Realize there's a basic requirement. You have to minimally read and write and have a certain basic education, and you have to have a certain background and a certain ability to even understand what the professors teach there. It's a whole different reality. But I think I could rub shoulders with these people. When they drink wine, I could drink wine the way they drink wine. But MIT is not about drinking wine and drinking beer and eating Bavarian pretzels. That's not what it's about. It's not what it's about. It's a different reality. You want to have a relation with God, to bask in his glory, which is the world to come. To have that intimate relationship, you have to have a soul that's been spiritualized, that has relevance to the holiness of God. If that soul does not have that capacity or have relevance to it, it doesn't have a share in the world to come. Because the world to come is a relation with God, an interaction with God, it be absorbing the radiance of God. You have to have that capacity to be able to absorb it and be there. And that's why the Jew has endlessly more positive and negative commandments to mentor it, develop it, and advance it, to give it that potential, to actualize that potential, to have a share in the world to come. So every child is born a tzaddik, because a child, when is born, is pure. Till the age of bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah, our actions have no negative effect on our souls. Only at the age of 13, 12, Now our choices make differences. Do we advance our souls? Do we diminish our souls? Until then, not. So Amcha Kulam Tzadikim. When we at get-go, we're all tzaddikim. We're pure and righteous. We have the world before us. We have eternity before us. The non-Jewish soul is not that. The non-Jewish soul, as the Maral I once mentioned the Maral, all the Noahide laws and negative commandments. The non-Jew is given a soul, and God says to the non-Jew, when you pass away, return it as I gave it to you. But the whole concept of advancement, there's no positive commandments among the Noahide laws except one, establishing a judicial system, legislating laws. Why? So Maral explains, because you have to have a judicial system to guarantee that people abide by the negative laws. So what's the connotation of negative? Don't cross the line. It's not your best interest. It will diminish you. So the negative, no-eyed laws are not to be diminished. So after as many years as they're meant to be on this earth, they should return the soul as it was given to them. A Jew, not only are there 365 negative commandments, we have 248 positive commandments. These are all advancement. Do this to be advanced. Once mentioned Arachaim HaKodesh, the negative commandment, when you abide by it, if you choose, the Gemara tells us, the Talmud tells us, that if a person's tempted to sin and he restrains himself, does not sin, it's considered like he did a mitzvah. What's the mitzvah? Person was tempted to have an illicit sexual relations, God forbid, adultery. And the person's tempted and he suppresses it and doesn't, it's considered he did a mitzvah. Which mitzvah did he do? What's the mitzvah? So the Rabbeinu Yonah explains in the Shari Tshuva, in the gates of penitence, that the mitzvah is you've actualized your reverence and fear of God. Because why did you restrain yourself? Because God says you're not permitted. So because I fear God, I revere God, therefore I suppressed my temptation and reined in on myself, and that's why I did not succumb to that temptation. So that's the mitzvah you fulfill. It's called Yirah Shamayim, fear of heaven. That's the mitzvah. Amech kulam tzadikim. Your people who are tzadikim. And that's why L'olam Yishu Oretz. And that's why even a person's in Russia, God forbid, he crossed too many lines, he still could have a share in the world to come. As long as he believes in God. Even though he didn't observe Shabbos, he didn't eat kosher, didn't even keep Yom Kippur, doesn't make a difference. He has to be purged to be able to have the relation with God. But in terms of his soul, everybody did something good in their life. His soul has been advanced or developed to some degree that he has a share in the world to come. He doesn't forfeit that share. Because his soul is that type of soul that has the capacity to have a relationship with God. The Talmud quotes a verse that says, the end of time, God will take the sun out of its sheath. And the tzaddikim will bask in its radiance. And the evil will be consumed by that radiance. The same radiance, we're talking about a spiritual radiance. The devoutly righteous will bask and thrive. And the evil will be vaporized, will be incinerated by that radiance. What's it all about? Very simple. You have a person, healthy pancreas, healthy system. He has nourishment. His body can process all the sugars. Healthy. You have a person who's a diabetic and has other health issues. Eats that same food. That food will put him into diabetic shock and he'll die. They'll go into a coma, die. It's the same food, same makeup. It's a different system. One system not only tolerates it, one system is becomes healthier and is emboldened by it. The other system, it shuts the system down. Doesn't have the capacity to be able to process and absorb whatever that is. This holy radiance, if the person's constitution has been spiritualized, the way he lived his life, when you're exposed to that radiance, it's more of the same. You bask, you thrive, you advance. The person who has no relevance to that, because of the life he lived, that radiance will kill him, will consume him, will vaporize him. The exact same thing. We talk about Olam Haba. Literally, the word Olam Haba means the world, the future world. Now, the early commentators speak that the appellation for the world to come, there's a generic world to come and there's the real world to come. When we use the term Garden of Eden, the world to come, we're not speaking about the ultimate world to come. When a person dies, as many years as you're meant to live in this world and you leave this world, where does the soul go? Before the soul is born into this world, there's a trove called the soul trove. And God releases the soul to be born into this world. And now you have your mission. Whatever that mission is, each person has a different mission. That mission is actualized through the challenges which God gives you. And each person's life is tailor-made to that person. And if you succeed in those challenges, then you merit a share in the world to come. Or you don't forfeit. God forbid you share in the world to come. Person lives his life as many years as he's meant to live, leaves this world. Now he goes to the soul world. What is the soul world? The person dies, the body is interred in the ground, and the soul is put in a holding pattern. What's the holding pattern? The holding pattern is the soul is spiritual, has no relevance to anything physical, and it's put into a holding pattern where the soul itself is exposed to the radiance of God, and it basks in the spiritual realm. Where's the body? The body is in the ground. And if the body itself, the person didn't live his life with total holiness, spirituality, the body decomposes. And 99.9 people decompose in the ground. Different levels of decomposition. Person is a great tzaddik, holy person in his life, does not decompose. Famous story, the Vilna Gaon. He passed away over 100 years earlier, and his grave had to be moved. And they exhumed his body from the ground, from the cemetery where he was buried, to bury him where he's buried today in the Vilna cemetery. His body was intact. It looked like a man was sleeping. And he already was in the ground over 100 years. Not as much as iota. What's the concept? You think about this one every once in a while. What is the body? The body itself is a receptacle for the soul. You can't have challenges if you're a spiritual being because you have no choice. So you're put into a physical body, which we have inclinations, which is subject to temptation. And if you continuously mentor that body and spiritualize it, that means this physical entity called the human body becomes the equivalent of a ministering vessel. It's a vessel that you're serving God. It becomes consecrated. It's a holy vessel. It's like you take a piece of cloth and you make it into a mantle for a Sefer Torah. The mantle of a Sefer Torah assumes the exact same identical holiness as the Sefer Torah itself. If the mantle becomes worn, you can't discard it. As the Sefer Torah becomes invalidated, you have to bury it, you have to bury the mantle. because the mantle served the Sefer Torah, enhanced it. The body itself, if it functions as the vehicle to advance the soul, not just as a domicile of the soul, but rather the body was the medium to actualize the mission of the soul, the body becomes a vessel of holiness. Decomposition has no relevance to that kind of vessel. The worms and the maggots, they only eat something that's physical. This is spiritual. This is a spiritual vessel. It's a ministry vessel. Therefore, the Vilna Gaon, if you read a little bit about his life, there wasn't a moment that wasn't fully invested at levels that we can't even relate to of Torah. His genius was something, it surpassed the computer. That was his level of understanding. His level of relevance to this world. He never slept more than a half an hour at a time, and only 2 hours in a 24-hour period. The amount of food he ate was little minuscule, miraculously. The amount that he ingested kept him fully alive, and he was healthy. And if you ever saw pictures, paintings of Vilna Gaon, he was a full-fleshed person. Looked not emaciated at all. And that's where he lived his life. Therefore, even though he was interred 125 years earlier, when he was exhumed, his body was intact. So let's talk about, we have a brain. The brain is something phenomenal. It gives the person understanding, analysis, retention, has many functions besides the body itself. The nervous system, something phenomenal. And you take that brain and you fully invest it in trying to understand the Torah. That means all that chemistry of the brain, the chemical reactions that provide all the various functions, every function is a spiritual function. The physicality is experiencing something in the spiritual realm. Your feelings, your love, your pain. God forbid a person sees God's name being desecrated. The halacha is, the law is that if God forbid a Jew sees a Sefer Torah being burnt, you have to tear kriya, you have to rent your garments. Because the pain should be so overwhelming when you see that Sefer Torah being desecrated. And the pain is so overwhelming, you cannot tolerate the pain. So that ability to experience pain, how is it expressed? When God's name is being desecrated. That's the ultimate. A person takes his body and he sanctifies God's name. And he dies to sanctify God's name. He's challenged. You either bow to the idol or you'll be killed. You commit murder or you'll be killed. The three cardinal sins, you must give your life. And the person gives his life. He took what's most precious in his existence, his life, and he gave it to God. When a person brings a sacrifice on the altar, that's the most advanced level of sanctification. The human being giving his life for God, it's the greatest demonstration of love for God. I'm willing to die and not live differently than God wants me to live. Because God says, if that should present itself, I must give my life. That's called a sanctification of God's life. You've sanctified God by giving your life. That person's called a martyr. He's holy. He's a holy person. That's what he is. So you think about it. Your skull, your brain, your internal organs, which are contained by the body, and you take your hand and you give tzedakah, you give charity. The hand was its function is to reach out, to take, to grasp, to whatever it is. You do a chesed, you help a person, an old lady across the street. You could have just walked by and glossed over it, not even noticed the woman. But you related to her need, or to a male, his need, and you assisted him. You put your hand in your pocket because you felt the person, you felt his lack, and you want to help him. That's called charity. That's called chesed. That means you've used your emotion as God wants you to use that emotion, to feel the other person's lack, his need, his pain. And if you could somehow assist him and alleviate it, or assist him, that's what it's meant to be. It's fully functioning as God wants it to function. The hand did a mitzvah, you're consecrating your hand. The hand becomes consecrated. You put tefillin on your arm every morning, and you're wearing the tefillin on the upper part of your arm. For your righty, it's on your left hand, and it corresponds to your heart. And you tie those tefillin, which is a positive commandment, which is called the sign. It's a sign, as the circumcision is a sign of the covenant. That's also a sign. That's our insignia, that we're God's people. And you're proud, and you put it on with pride. And I say, I dedicate my heart, my emotion, because the tefillin corresponds to my heart, to God. What does that do? Firstly, your arm is sanctified, and that feeling, your heart becomes sanctified. It infuses your heart with a level of sanctification. And anything we do throughout our lives, whatever we do, eat the matzah. It's a positive commandment. You sit at the Seder and you chew it and eat that physical item, which is flour and water, which is not leavened. You feel the positive commandment. Your digestive system is being utilized in what context? To do the will of God. Your palate, your teeth, your enzymes that allow the digestion of that matzah, it's all being invested in what? In spirituality. The person becomes spiritualized. The more we invest in the spiritual realm, the greater is that spiritualization. And it grows and intensifies. Though there's an expression, an aura. Certain people, a person's a great tzaddik. You meet him, there's an aura. Can't be described. An aura. Where does it emanate from? The person can't put his finger on it, but the person senses immediately this person's something special. Lady finds out that the person's a holy person. The person says, I knew he was holy. I sensed the holiness. What is holiness? Where does it emanate from? You know? It emanates because the person lives a life of holiness. Moshe Rabbeinu sees the burning bush, and God says to Moshe, remove your shoes because the ground is hallowed ground. It's holy land, holy earth. Therefore, remove your shoes. It's inappropriate. It's holy. Why is it holy? Because God is associated with that location. A person who does mitzvahs, and we invest our lives in doing the will of God, that means in this physical world, we're already having a relationship with God. And we meet those challenges. We could have gone the opposite direction. We have choice, and we chose to go north rather than go south. So God says, you've used your physicality to invest it in what? In spirituality. To go against the grain, not to succumb. Therefore, there's a result. The result is called spiritualization. It's called holiness. It gives you a capacity, and that impacts your soul. So therefore, when the person dies, the soul is enhanced and advanced. It's spiritualized. And because it's spiritualized, it has relevance to God's holiness. Therefore, it allows you to have a level of relationship. And the more you advance it, the more you expand it. Quantitatively, qualitatively. You can do a mitzvah with an ulterior motive. You can do a mitzvah for the sake of God. The end result of that will determine to what degree you're advanced and spiritualized. And that will determine at what level you have that relationship. Go ahead.
Rabbi, the question is this. As you know, I've read the Pirkei Avos books, and I find this fascinating. My pages tell me, as I date them, that I've read this in 02, in 14, in 2020. There's even another one in here I can't read. But so my soul must not be geared to get this, because I don't get it, and I've read it, and I don't feel like I'm a fool, and I find some of the passages fascinating. Can you explain why I just don't internalize this?
Okay. Firstly, I want to take issue with Larry when he's saying I have a pretty good memory, and I remember events very accurately. The times Larry shared with me, he was reading Pirkei Avos and how he was touched. When he learned that he was touched, but when you get distracted, we get distracted very quickly, as they say, out of sight, out of mind. It's like we were never touched. But there have been moments in the past where you are touched. He says, I read today a few hours, I sat and read the Chumash. I read this. And it was only because he felt touched at some point. But if you detach, the Chofetz Chaim writes something very interesting. Within the laws relating to Shabbos, you're not permitted to cook on Shabbos. What is cooking? Cooking is we put something on the fire. That's how you cook. What about it? You had a vessel on the fire, and the vessel reached a certain temperature. And now you take that vessel off the fire. And let's say the vessel is 180 degrees Fahrenheit, and there's water in there. And you put a food item in that water. Even though the vessel is no longer on the fire, but since the heat absorbed in that vessel is as a result of the fire, that's considered you've cooked. But let's say you take that vessel, remove it from fire, and leave it off the fire for an hour. So although that vessel originally was on the fire, but over time it cools down. As a result of that, putting in that water will no longer cook that item because it no longer has the heat that originally that metal absorbed from the fire. So the Chofetz Chaim says this: a person who studies Torah himself, he contains the Torah. The prophet says the words of Torah are like fire. So the Talmud Chacham, who possesses the Torah, he has fire in the belly. The one who has a relation with the Talmud Chacham, he's warmed by the fire. He absorbs the fire. The longer he's associated with that source, he'll retain that heat and he'll be touched. But if you detach yourself from that influence, it depends how long you detach. If initially you're very involved over an extended period of time, it'll last longer. But let's say you were touched and now you detach yourself. Just a question of time before you cool down, as the vessel cools down. So therefore he says the person who's not the Talmud Chacham, the way to remain and have the effect of those teachings, be associated with that person and continue to be infused with the teachings of that person. And that will keep you vibrant and that you'll be touched. But if you detach yourself, then we say really out of sight, out of mind. It's like it never happened almost. It's at best, it's a fond memory. It's intellectual, it makes sense. It's this, I enjoy it, but it's not the same as when you're actually involved, engaged in the process itself, absorbing it. It's a different reality. Okay? It's only because the way you live a person lives his life. You come to a class, it's great, you fulfill the mitzvah Talmud Torah. We still say Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. Every word that we've studied during this hour, every word is the equivalent of 613 mitzvos. It's mega accomplishment in the world to come. To what degree will it impact on your life? It's up to the person. If you want to now build on that and extend it into your day and be cognizant of those teachings, and besides putting on tefillin, you say the Shema, be more focused. The more you're involved, the more touched you are. The more touched you are, the more you do. But if you allow yourself to be distracted, for whatever reason, it's going to cool down. And you have to be reattached. It's like you put something, you have a wattage, 10,000. That's how it glows. 10,000 megawatts. You pull the plug out of the source, goes black, goes dark. Second ago, it was beaming. You touch the bulb, it's hot. where those 10,000 megawatts are coming out of. Wait an hour. You won't feel the heat of that bulb any longer. But as long as it's plugged in, it beams, it's clear, it makes sense, and really it's phenomenal. I'm proud to be who I am. The moment you pull it out, you're in the dark. But initially you were enlightened because if you touch it, you feel the heat, brings back memories. But once it cools off totally, you don't even have the memory, at best a fond memory. Regarding Lashon Hara, the evil inclination immediately tries to discourage us from assuming to be more careful. Why? The Chofetz Chaim shows that over time, if you don't know the laws well, even if you want to be careful, it's inevitable you're going to violate because you believe things are permitted and not permitted. So you have to study the laws. The facts, you have to know the facts. 14 positive commandments, 17 negative commandments. And as they say, it's a mouthful. It's a mouthful. And he writes over there, you're going to have immediately whisperings in the air by the evil inclination. Do you think you're going to succeed? It'll last a day, 2 days, 3 days. In a week, you're going to be back where you were. Why waste your time? Why even start? That's the discouragement of the evil inclination. So he says, I want to ask you a question. The way I say to Lara, I want to ask you a question. Person goes on a beach, and he's a beachcomber. And first day he's on the beach, he finds a diamond worth $1 million. Okay? Tremendous find. Next day, the beachcomber's on the beach. Somebody says, what are you doing here? He says, look, I'm looking for diamonds. He says, what are you wasting your time? He says, what are we wasting? I found the diamond. He says, and even if you find another diamond, is it really worth it? 2 days, 3 days later, you're not going to find anything. He says, does it make any sense? If I've already found a diamond the first day, $1 million diamond, and there's a chance, even if the third day and fourth day, I don't find diamonds, doesn't make a difference. Whatever I found, it's worth a fortune. Whenever we succeed, if it lasts 5 hours and you kept your mouth closed and you said you didn't speak what you shouldn't speak because for the right reason, you know what level of accomplishment that is? That's firstly. So that right away, that's the pushback against the evil inclination. In addition, he says it's not even right. The more you suppress it, the easier it becomes. And over time, you'll learn from experience that he says, of course, we're gonna have setbacks. 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards, back and forth. But over time, if you really want to succeed, you will succeed. So he's giving a supposition, which is a false supposition. That's firstly. And even if you buy into what he says, it's still worth it for the short period of time that you succeeded. It has infinite worth. Therefore, as he says, go for it. It's the same thing we're talking about here. You may cool down. You put on the tefillin, you say the Shema. You learn for an hour, half an hour. It doesn't make a difference. But you know what the level of accomplishment is? What are you wasting your time? It's not worth, what do you mean it's not worth anything? You call your stockbroker in the morning, and the rest of the day you do something else. That one call, you made enough that other people don't make in 10 years. Oh, you were on the phone for 5 minutes. What are you wasting your time? Other people don't have 5 minutes. They accomplish nothing. When I get on the phone, what I accomplish, Louis Glick used to tell me, he had clients. He had the sheiks from Saudi Arabia were his clients. And he used to say to me, Mr. Glick didn't get to start working at his desk in his office until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. What was he busy with? He would come to Yad Avram. He would study. He first came into the office about 11:30. And then people right away came. This one needs this, chesed, they need advice, how to earn a living, give a person a piece of the diamond, whatever it is. Finally, 1 o'clock, he sits down to get to work. Gets a call from Saudi Arabia. A sheikh needs a diamond, $15 million sale. He says what he makes in one sale, other people have to work years. Hashem gives it to him. That's it. What we are able to accomplish in a minute, the world can't accomplish if they lived 1,000 years. Because when we do the mitzvah, what is the innate value of that mitzvah? It has such value, you can't even be rewarded in this world. So what are you wasting? You talk 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Why don't you go to the Yankee game? Why? They lost the World Series. Where am I going? Yeah. But he tries to minimize it. And that's his ploy to us. It has no value. You want to look like some kind of archaic person? You're going to be a religious Jew, a Haredi, these people, extreme. You want to be embraced by society. You don't want to be a woke person? No, I don't want to be woke. I want to be awoken, not woke. You got it? I want to be awake. Woke is past. Awake is in present. Deviro, he's buried in the Svat cemetery right next to the Arizal. When he passed away, the Arizal, the great Kabbalist, they lived in the 1500s, eulogized him. And he said that the Ramak Rabosh Deviro, he was so holy, he never sinned. The only reason why he had to die was because of the sin of Adam. That's how pure he was. And he has a work, it's called Tomet Dvorah, the palm tree of Dvorah. And over there he writes, he speaks about the attributes of God in terms of what we have to, what we have to tolerate another person. And he says that even if a Jew is evil, bad guy, God still will love that person. Why? Because there's a concept, the prophet says, when we left Egypt, we had no provisions. And despite that, we went into the desert. And the Navi says, the prophet says, I will always remember the chesed you did to me in your youth, the love you showed. You went into uncharted desert, unplanted, purely based on your faith, your trust in me. I will never forget that. So therefore, Hashem says, every Jew, this is the Ramoshe Gudaviro, every Jew when he's born, he's pure. He's never sinned. Even if he's become an extreme sinner, Hashem says, I always remember when you were born, you were pure. And because of that purity, I will always have mercy on you. That will always activate and touch me, that I'll do whatever I can to assist you. That's Lech Lecha. You go back to the very beginning. What's the beginning of the Jew when he's born? Well, every Jew when he's born, I don't care what he becomes, he was born pure. And because you're born with that pure soul, and the Rambam says a Jew could turn around the last second if he does tshuva before he dies. He passes, he's a tzaddik. He lived a life of evil the whole life. And the last moment, the last breath he takes before that, he has remorse for all the evil he did. He passes away at tzaddik for that. But that really goes back to that. Why? Because innately, who is the Jew? It's like a parent with a child. Child goes off a whole life. At the last moment, he calls the parent and says, I want to come back. The parent will embrace, and the parent is ecstatic, regardless of what the past is. The past is wiped out. All that makes a difference is the moment. And that's what it's about. So if that's the case, so if a person lives his whole life, or a good part of his life, doing even more of that, how much more is the parent excited?